Hello all you freedom-loving people. Pam Bondi unveiled a grand jury investigation into the Russiagate allegations. Russia finally responded to President Trump's positioning of U.S. nuclear subs in the region of Russia. And so, are China's civilian ships preparing for war in the Taiwan Strait? Okay, let's get into it. Today, the Department of Justice announced a grand jury investigation into the Russiagate allegations. Pam Bondi ordered her staff to act on the criminal referral from Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard related to the Russiagate allegations, and Bondi directed an unnamed federal prosecutor to initiate legal proceedings.
Now, Fox News reviewed the one-page order just hours ago signed by the Attorney General. A source familiar with the probe confirms this as well, while a DOJ spokesperson declined to comment on this report of an investigation. Fox is told Attorney General Bondi is taking the referrals from Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, quote, very seriously. The spokesperson says that Bondi believes there is, quote, clear cause for deep concern, end quote, and a need for the next steps. Now, this move comes just a couple of weeks after the Director of National Intelligence, you see her right there, Tulsi Gabbard, sent a criminal referral to the Justice Department regarding what she says proves there was a conspiracy to undermine Trump's candidacy and later his first term in office. Now, to be clear today, there are no charges that have been filed, no indictments. This is incredibly early in the process. What we have here is taking evidence the Justice Department believes it has to a grand jury to secure an eventual indictment or indictments. We don't know exactly where the grand jury will meet. We don't know who will go before the grand jury, and that's by design, because grand juries determine if there's enough evidence to indict, and grand juries are secretive in the American legal system, so it's normal not to know all of the answers.
And regarding the U.S. nuclear submarines, over the weekend, President Trump confirmed that they are in the region of Russia. The move began on Friday when President Trump said that he would reposition 2 nuclear submarines following what he called highly provocative remarks made by former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, who is currently the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council. And yesterday, when asked about the submarines, President Trump confirmed that the submarines are in position.
On Russia, Mr. President, can you say, have those nuclear submarines been deployed yet to face Russia?
I've already put out a statement, and the answer is they are in the region, yeah, where they have to be.
And on Friday, President Trump also explained the reason behind his decision in more detail.
Where are being deployed the nuclear submarines?
Oh, yeah, well, we had to do that. We just have to be careful. And a threat was made, and we didn't think it was appropriate. So I have to be very careful. So I do that on the basis of safety for our people. A threat was made by a former president of Russia, and we're going to protect our people.
Mr. President,
can you give us any more information on the nuclear subs? And what did Medvedev say to you that made you really mad?
Well, you just have to read what he said. He was talking about nuclear. When you talk about nuclear, we have to be prepared, and we're totally prepared.
And today, the Russian government publicly responded to President Trump's move for the first time. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told a state-run media, in this case, it's obvious that American submarines are already on combat duty. This is a constant process. Peskov also said that Russia does not want to get involved in such a controversy in any way, and that they are very careful about any statements related to nuclear issues. Peskov said that Moscow is very attentive to the topic of nuclear non-proliferation. He said, we believe that everyone should be very, very careful with nuclear rhetoric. We do not believe that we are talking about any escalation now. It's clear that very complex, very sensitive issues are being discussed, which of course are perceived very emotionally by many people. But Peskov declined to answer directly when asked whether the Kremlin had asked Medvedev to tone down his online statements. Peskov instead said, the main thing, of course, is the position of President Putin. Also regarding Russia today, President Trump said in a Truth Social post that he believes India is purchasing massive amounts of Russian oil and then selling it on the open market for big profits, and that India does not care how many people in Ukraine are being killed by the Russian war machine. So he wrote, because of this, I will be substantially raising the tariff paid by India. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the CPB, announced on Friday that it is beginning to wind down its operations after Congress cut funding to public broadcasting. Last month, the U.S. Congress passed a bill that cut $9 billion in spending, primarily targeting funding for public media and foreign aid. President Trump then signed the bill into law. The budget cut in the bill includes approximately $1.1 billion in funding that was originally anticipated for the CPB, which is responsible for distributing federal funds to more than 1,500 local radio and television stations across the U.S., including the National Public Radio, the NPR, and the Public Broadcasting Service, PBS. The CPB said in a statement that the company had issued a notice on Friday that most of the employee positions would be laid off at the end of the 2025 fiscal year on September 30th. However, a small transition team will remain in place until January 2026 to ensure that the CPB completes the winding down of its operations in a responsible and orderly manner. President Trump and many Republicans argue that spending taxpayer dollars to fund public broadcasting is unnecessary government spending, while claiming that the PBS and the NPR programs demonstrate anti-conservative bias. On August 2nd, the U.S. Office of Special Counsel launched an investigation into former DOJ Special Counsel Jack Smith on whether Smith's conduct in his efforts to prosecute President Trump constituted improper political activity. The U.S. Office of Special Counsel is an independent federal agency separate from the DOJ that is tasked with protecting federal whistleblowers and enforcing civil service law. Jack Smith brought 2 separate federal criminal cases against President Trump during the Biden administration. He has become a world-renowned figure as a result, but being famous isn't always a good thing. 3 days before the Office of Special Counsel's announcement of the investigation, Senator Tom Cotton called on the office to probe Smith for partisan election interference. In the letter to the office, Cotton alleged that Smith pursued his criminal cases against President Trump on an expedited timeline, attempting to bring the cases to trial in the opening phases of the 2024 election cycle. Cotton wrote, after filing the indictment against President Trump on August 10, 2023, Smith demanded the trial start on January 2, 2024, with jury selection beginning as early as December 11, 2023. Defendants in these cases typically have more than 2 years to prepare for trial, but President Trump's defense team had fewer than 6 months to review 13 million pages of evidence and thousands of hours of video footage provided by prosecutors. Notably, jury selection was to begin just 2 weeks before the Iowa caucuses. Cotton also noted that Smith pushed his cases forward in September 2024, just weeks before the 2024 election day. Cotton also said, this action also appears to violate the Justice Department's 60-day rule, which prohibits timing any action for the purpose of affecting an election or giving an advantage or disadvantage to a candidate within 60 days of the election. The Wire China recently featured a report that the communist China state-owned company Costco Shipping is a Trojan horse of the CCP's naval fleet. The company is deeply involved in the military activities of the Chinese Communist Party under a civilian flag. The report mentions that in early December 2024, a few days before the CCP's military held large-scale military exercises around Taiwan, a seemingly ordinary cargo ship arrived at the port of Taichung, Taiwan. It was the Hong Kong-flagged cargo ship, the SCSC Fortune. But in fact, this is no ordinary civilian cargo ship. 2 years ago, it took part in an amphibious infiltration exercise that was conducted by the Special Forces of the CCP. There's also now a video that is available on YouTube that was made public by the CCTV military channel of the Chinese Communist Party media in 2022. It shows the SCSC Fortune cranes lifting at least 6 impulse boats into cargo bays during a so-called maritime penetration exercise, each of which can carry more than 10 Special Forces soldiers. The ship was then covered with large metal plates and disguised as a civilian ship, and then it was secretly delivered to a location where it was unloaded into the sea to help the Chinese Communist Party's special forces to land and carry out raids. The video's footage also shows that the exercise focuses on civilian boats switching to impulse boats for maritime penetration, which significantly enhances the task force's ability to conduct long-distance maritime delivery. Taiwan legislator Wang Dingyu used the term Trojan horse to describe these vessels, pointing out that these commercial vessels, which appear harmless, are a threat to Taiwan's security if they are instantly converted to military use in the event of war. The SCSC Fortune belongs to COSCO Shipping. Its vessels travel regularly to and from all major ports in Taiwan. The U.S. military has also taken note of the CCP's ploy to participate in military operations with pretend civilian vessels. According to a U.S. Naval War College 2021 report, the CCP military has had plans to convert roll-on cargo ships into combat vehicle carriers since 2019. The U.S. Army's 2023 report on the military strength of the CCP singles out the military threat that is posed by CCP civilian roll-on cargo ships in the Taiwan Strait. In addition to these tasks, COSCO's vessels also have other tasks in the gray area. In February of this year, COSCO's Hongtai 58 sailed back and forth in an area of the Taiwan Strait where anchoring is prohibited, cutting the marine cable that connects Taiwan to Penghu. Penghu is home to Taiwan's second largest naval base. In January, the Biden administration placed COSCO Shipping and two of its subsidiaries on a list of Chinese military companies operating in the United States. CBS News also published an investigative report exposing how the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, secretly buys Iranian oil through the so-called dark fleet and circumvents U.S. sanctions through ship-to-ship transfers. A CBS News correspondent who recently departed from Singapore to international waters in the mid-range of the Malaysian Riau Archipelago witnessed firsthand the operation of the dark fleet. Charlie Brown, a former U.S. Navy officer who's been monitoring the Dark Fleet for years, described one ship, the Tiffany, as a well-known Dark Fleet tanker that's always been out here on a regular basis. The tankers, full of oil, sail from the Persian Gulf through the Strait of Malacca to the Riau Archipelago. There, they transfer the crude oil to ships bound for China. During the journey, the CBS crew watched 4 ship-to-ship transfers happening in plain sight. The transponders on these tankers were switched off in order to avoid tracking identification. There were 2 boats whose sterns were covered with nets to hide the names and identification numbers of the boats. The investigation found that one of the ship's branches, named Stellar Oracle, had been placed on the U.S. government's sanctions list as early as May of this year. Another tanker, alias Alps, also carrying Iranian crude oil, was also sanctioned in May. The Eon, which received the oil from this tanker, is not on the list, but has also been photographed engaging in illegal transactions, making it a new violator. Brown told CBS News that the waters have almost become a dark fleet parking lot. The White House is very unhappy with the oil trade between Iran and the CCP. According to a U.S. congressional report, this type of sanctions circumventing oil trade may have generated up to $70 billion in revenue for Iran. The U.S. is concerned that the billions of dollars from this trade will ultimately be used to fund Iran's nuclear ambitions and regional disruptions. It has also made the Trump administration's sanctions against Iran have little effect. As a result, the U.S. government has imposed several rounds of sanctions against Iran and China. The U.S. Department of the Treasury announced on July 30th that it had imposed the largest sanction action since 2018, covering more than 115 individuals, companies, and ship branches, targeting a large Iranian shipping and trading network. The Treasury Department also announced comprehensive sanctions against the network belonging to Mohammed Hussein Shamkhani, who controls Iran's shipping empire. The network includes shell companies disguised as financial service companies suspected of money laundering through the crude oil trade with Chinese buyers. The State Council of the People's Republic of China has also put 20 enterprises that are engaged in the trade of Iranian petroleum and petrochemical products on the sanctions list, including Jiaoshan Jinrun Petroleum Transit Company. The company has assisted a number of sanctioned tankers, including the Viola and the Rani, in receiving at least 6 shipments of Iranian crude oil. But China refuses to recognize these unilateral sanctions, insisting that trade with Iran is legal and in compliance. Last time in our Fed versus the White House series, we talked about William Martin. Martin stepped down as Fed chair in 1970, and he was replaced by Arthur Burns. Burns was very much in tune with President Nixon's policies, but it also didn't end well. For more details on this part of the story, please watch our previous video on the first installments of this series. Although Burns was an accomplished economist, he was criticized by the mainstream for being too obedient to the president. Congress began to scrutinize the Fed's monetary policy in order to avoid a similar situation as Martin. Congress required the Fed to submit a report on monetary policy to Congress every 6 months, and the Fed chair was required to attend hearings in the House of Representatives and the Senate. Soon, the Fed welcomed another so-called miracle working chairman, Paul Volcker. In 1979, President Jimmy Carter nominated him to succeed G. William Miller as Fed chairman. He faced the worst timing for the U.S. economy in nearly 100 years, with 14% inflation, 7.5% unemployment, runaway gold prices, and the U.S. economy was in stagflation. Volcker's goal was simple: bring inflation down. So he raised interest rates from 11% to over 20%. So the results of increasing the interest rate to 20% were dramatic. Inflation fell rapidly from 13.5% in 1980 to 3.2% in 1983. At the time, Volcker was also under great pressure for this unusual approach. Interest rates of up to 20% led to the worst economic crisis in the United States since the Second World War, with unemployment reaching 10.8% in 1982. Small and medium-sized businesses and farmers went bankrupt, and Volcker himself received frequent death threats. President Carter complained about him, and President Reagan tried to intervene, but to no avail. Volcker refused an invitation from the White House, and he publicly stated that the Fed did not serve any political party. This period was perhaps the most acrimonious for the Fed in the White House. But time has proven that Volcker's approach was justified from the perspective of protecting the fiat currency economy. After a brief period of pain, the U.S. economy was revitalized for at least 20 years. At that time, the United States was just out of the Bretton Woods system. This strong suppression of inflation by Volcker greatly enhanced the market confidence in the dollar, so the dollar has continued to be the reserve currency. A 6.7 magnitude earthquake struck the Kuril Island region of Russia on Sunday, marking the second time in a week that an earthquake has struck Russia's far east. The depth of the earthquake was 10 kilometers. However, data measured by the United States Geological Survey and the Pacific Tsunami Warning System indicated that the earthquake in the Kuril Islands region was of magnitude 7. Furthermore, no tsunami warning was issued after the earthquake. The Kuril Islands quake may also be linked to July 30th tremors, experts analyzed. The tremor also caused another volcano, the Krasheninnikov volcano, to erupt on Saturday night for the first time in about 600 years. And the ash column rose to about 6,000 meters. The column of smoke is spreading eastward from the volcano toward the Pacific Ocean. Fortunately, there are no densely populated areas in its path, and no ashfall has been recorded in inhabited areas. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember to leave a comment below the video. This is really helping us to be seen all around the world. The more people who watch Front Page, the more freedom-loving people the world will have. And please hit the like button and hit the notification bell after subscribing. And please share this video with your friends and family because everybody deserves to know the truth.